Hey everyone, Sycra here, and today I'm going to be doing a critique of one of the forum members over at the Sycra.net forums. Okay, so I'm just duplicating this image, and it's a landscape, and it's very well done. There's just a few things that I felt could be improved on, but overall, there's so much that's going right in this. And so what I've done right now is I've created a black layer set to color or saturation. That's just so I can check values. And now I'm using a layer set to luminosity, which just fixes, it just changes the value, but it doesn't disturb the color. So I can work in black and white mode using luminosity, and it won't, and it will still be colorful instead of creating blacks and whites where they shouldn't be. And I felt like you could really add some lighter, brighter highlights, especially towards the front, because there is a lot of contrast in the front, but there could be more. And my other feeling is that there's not as much distance as there could be in the midground. It's like you've got a very nice foreground, and then you've got a very nice background, but I mean, on the right side there's like a rock formation in the midground, which is fine, but on the left side there's not as much. So you'll see me constantly turn on that value layer, and that's because I really want to check that the values are working. And I darken the corners as well as minimizing some of those details, because I figure that bridge is way off in the background. That's your focal point. That's where you want the people to look. And so I don't want as much, it's not detail, but I don't want your eye to focus on the foreground as much. And what I'm doing now is I'm just using the polygonal lasso. Polygonal lasso? Yeah. That tool, I'm using that to just go around the rocks and then create some atmosphere using a large soft brush. So I think I only used 2 brushes in this. Maybe I used a pencil tool for the highlights way in the beginning, but otherwise I think I was just using a chalk brush and a soft brush, and both of those brushes I got from Anthony Jones, who I'll post a link in the description to where you can get those brushes if you think they'll help you. Yeah, so here what I'm doing is I'm adding more of that mid-tone, or not mid-tone, mid-ground, because as I said, I thought it was lacking, and also I wanted some more repeated shapes, because you've got those trees in the foreground, and it would be nice, and this is all my opinion, but I felt it might be nice to have those in the midground as well, so it sort of has repeated shapes, and then it leads our eye towards that bridge in the background. So what I'm doing here is I felt there was too much green, like just green, 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 and you need some variations on that. And in shadows, I like to go to warm, deep red or deep reddish brown, something like that in the deep shadows, and it seems to add a lot more life and punch to things. And yeah, it might seem weird. Why would you add like warms in a green, like red shadows in green? But it does seem to be the case whenever I look in shadows, even in real life, they tend to warm up. So, yep. So now I'm also adding some more things that could be going on in the midground rather, almost to the background, and strengthening values, thinking, what's in shadow, what's going to catch the light. One thing I didn't really address, which might have been a problem, but I wasn't entirely sure, is the water itself and how it gets very blue, whereas it's usually getting some reflection from the sky, so I wasn't sure how blue that could get. But I sort of left it because I wasn't sure either way. And now I had this idea of just breaking down that background, because right now you've got the bridge, but you've got like the cliff faces on either side, and yeah, they look big because they're so big they go out of the page, right? But it's this thing where it almost, because they go out of the page, you can't really determine the scale of things, and also you're not getting some sky, which could really balance the composition. So, feel free to completely ignore this if this was something that is very specific, like if there's a world you're creating and that's exactly what the bridge looks like and that's what everything has to look like. But just from an image making point of view, I did feel like maybe it would look even bigger if the cliff was visible, like the top of the cliff. And later on, I change it up again because I was thinking maybe it is important that right now the bridge is not at the top of the cliff area. And so I will change the cliffs so that the bridge is more in the middle, while trying to maintain that feeling that we still see the sky and we get much more sense of scale. And because now you see the cliffs going into the background, it does feel somehow even bigger than in your original. And yeah, I'm just always trying to create more depth, and you do that by you get the lights and the darks and the loss of contrast in the background, yeah, but you also have to go light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. So I'll take light areas and then make sure there's a bit of dark behind them. Even though it's lighter than in the foreground, there's still way more contrast in the foreground. And now I'm just changing this rock, because in the original you can see that the rock touches that right side of the cliff face, and that's a tangent that it's sort of distracting. And I had two options. I could sort of push the rock in front of that cliff face or sort of minimize it. And I decided to minimize it because if it's in front of that cliff, it really starts taking too much priority and dominance. But it is a pretty good tool, like a pointing tool, to sort of point towards that bridge and say, hey, look at this. Because now your eye is pretty much led down that path to the bridge. And now I just wanted to add, again, more variation. Especially if you have a lot of green, play around with the greens. Get some more blue greens, some more yellow greens. You can play around a lot. And you'll see this in nature as well. It's not just one green, especially in a lush area. So you want to play around a lot with variation to bring in life. And also focus on the values, because I felt like in your trees there was a lot of washed out colors. And I know there's this effect, it's almost like a ink painting or a watercolor painting where you have a lot of washed out colors, but I noticed that you had some pretty strong greens in the foreground, and if you're going to do that, that sort of tells me, well, I'm not going 100% for that certain washed out style. And so I thought, well, okay, if you're not going to go completely washed out, then you need to strengthen your values. You need to have stronger values in the trees. And just going back and trying more things, and I just merged the layers down so I have a better idea, and I'm just comparing before and after. And here's where I do actually change that cliff so that maybe it is tall and that bridge goes right through the middle, but I didn't really want to lose all that nice sky that was gained, so I figured compromise might be just to change the shape of that cliff. And again, it's just a suggestion. You don't have to go ahead and do that. What I would rather you think about in the future is this distracting, or what am I trying to get across? Am I trying to get across a sense of scale? Do I want things to be gigantic? Because then you can't just, or it doesn't help to crop things too soon. And also there's a common mistake, which is you want something to look big, so you make it big on the page. And sometimes that makes it look small. Sometimes making the big thing smaller makes it look bigger. And it's a bit of a contradiction, but it works. I also added some birds in the sky, and birds are just a great, useful device for bringing life into an image, and they're pretty easy. You just do those W shapes or M shapes, or V shapes, and it's like, yeah, instant flock of birds. But yeah, they bring life, they bring scale, so you can tell, okay, this thing is pretty big. And now again, I'm playing with variation in the greens and getting stronger greens, and I want to pop something out, so I put dark behind it. If it's a bit lighter, then it needs a bit of dark behind it. And then just by layering that over and over and over again, getting all these light, dark, light, dark, light, dark patterns, that's what really brings life to your image and depth. So let's see. I looked at yours and I noticed that you had some blues in those cliffs, and those are really nice. That was a really nice touch, and there's tons that I like about your image. It's really cool the way you made the washed out colors. They're colorful. They're not just dead colors, and that's really cool. So I didn't want to lose that. And later on I will be adding some more color variation. I think I'll use just an overlay layer and a big soft brush just to add some more color. And what I'm doing now is crunching your image to just make it more widescreen. Especially in epic things, you can go more widescreen. It's a bit of a cheat, just to make things look better. You don't have to do this, but I did feel like it never hurts. And especially with a landscape where you can stretch up and down and it doesn't do too much. If you were doing a portrait and you stretch it, no, the person's face is now stretched. But with a landscape, it's like, who's going to say, oh, that tree is all wrong now, it's too stretched. And here's where I'm adding all that color variation, just with an overlay layer and lightly adding some, red areas or more blue areas or more yellow areas, whatever. And just, color variation. It's all about variation. And pretty much that's it. Almost done now, but yeah, great job, and, keep those things in mind, those suggestions.